Yo, what's going on, guys? How you doing? Welcome back to Of Heroes and Men. Today I got somebody that John Sonmez, somebody who has had a great impact on me and has led me to really change my life in a positive way. So I'm really happy to have him. And John, thanks for taking the time today to talk to us and share some of your wisdom, man.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
A couple things. I had a good time going over. I'm in the Bulldog mindset for the people that are wondering. I've been there for I think like a year and a half now. And the stuff in there, it's like it's a steal, really. The price point that you got it at, man, because the information in there is killer. There's just so much good stuff in there. So I had a good time going through it. One thing that I wanted to get started with. So the whole point of this channel is basically the subject line is I'm resurrecting the archetypes of manhood, and I try to use history, archetypes from history as much as I can. And you're a big proponent of stoicism.
Yeah.
Something you talk a lot about. And I'm just curious to know, like, what got you interested in stoicism? Well, yeah, let's start with that.
Yeah. So it's sort of interesting. I started figuring out some of the concepts on my own, just in life. Like as I was facing struggles in life, and I was in a pretty bad relationship situation for a long time. And when you're in that kind of situation, like you have to really learn self-reliance in order for survival. And so like I had these bad circumstances that were happening in my life that I had no control over. Like, you can't control other people. And because of that, I had to really look inward, and I had to figure out, like, I could not allow my life to be the tranquility of my life to be dictated by the external circumstances that I had no control over. And so I started developing these concepts for managing myself, managing my emotions, controlling my own inner state, even when the outer was crazy. And then I read this book called "The Obstacles Away" by Ryan. Shoot, I just lost this.
Holloway or Holiday, something like that, right?
Yeah, Ryan Holiday. And then that was sort of my introduction to stoicism. I was like, wow, this is like exactly what I've been kind of trying to implement on my own and practice. And it lines up exactly with the life philosophy that I sort of discovered in life. And so what it comes down to is, I truly believe that stoicism, like the philosophy of stoicism, it is the only way to live. And it's a universal, right? So it's like, when people say, Stoic philosophy or Stoic philosophers, it is really just the uncovering of the truth, right? Because the situation in life is that there are so many things that are beyond our control, right? Everything is beyond our control, essentially. The only thing that is within our control is our own thoughts and our own actions. But every other thing is out of our control. And so, there is really only one answer to that in life, which is that you must make your internal state not be dependent on the external, the things that you can't control. And that's what stoicism teaches, and that's what stoicism does. So really, stoicism is a universal truth. And so it's something that it's a path that, anyone who's looking for wisdom will eventually stumble upon on their own, right? And then, of course, there was the school of thought and the Stoic philosophers, which really focus on those things. And so that's when I started studying that. I started reading Seneca's letters to Lucilius, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. This is so timeless. This is, true wisdom. These are the deep truths of life that apply to anyone in life. And so that really is what got me into that, and, kind of discovering those things. But I think that at some point, I think that everyone in life, when they face external challenges, they're going to get to a point where they're going to either just go along with it and ride the roller coaster of emotion and external circumstances, or they're going to have to in some way go the Stoic path and say, okay, no, whatever happens external, this does not necessarily have to affect my internal.
Right. I'm a huge fan of Marcus Aurelius, obviously, in Meditations and stuff, and he was maybe the most famous one. Obviously Seneca is who he is, and I found it interesting that this guy was like running the Roman Empire, but at the same time, like, he had to survive a plague, and his wife cheated on him a bunch of times, and then he fought in wars and shit, and so he had to like figure out, just like you, how to sort of handle every single day. So I thought that was amazing. There's something that you say is how you live. I think it's you said how you live one day is how you live every day, right? That's something that you said in the Bulldog mindset.
Yeah, yeah. It's sort of, I kind of took it from the quote of how you do one thing is how you do everything,
Right.
but it's sort of the bigger picture of that, right? It's like, the whole idea is that if you make certain choices today, right? If you say, all right, I'm going to have a donut, or today I'm going to skip the gym, or today I'm not feeling energetic, so I'm going to just relax and not do what I need to do, then you have to realize that that's going to echo through time. Like that making those choices today is not making the choice today, it's making the choice in the future as well, because however you live that day, there's always going to be circumstances, there's always going to be situations, there's always going to be some excuse, there's going to be holidays, there's going to be birthdays, there's going to be bad things that happen to you, and so in those moments, how you choose to live that one day is how you're going to live every day. So you have to keep that in mind, because that is really what's at stake. Because all of the mistakes that we make where we slip and we fall off track, it's because we don't believe this. It's because we believe that this is just an exception, but there's always exceptions in life. And so we have to really put aside this idea that today is just a day, it doesn't matter. Instead, realizing that making these choices echo through time. And so how you live one day is how you're going to live every day. And so if you decide you're not going to go to the gym today, you're going to be lazy, you're going to goof off, it's going to happen every day. Like tomorrow's not going to be better, right? In fact, it'll be harder, right? The more that you make a wrong choice, the more reinforced that choice is, and the more of a habit it is. It's always easier to make the right choice today than it is to make the right choice tomorrow.
Right. And that makes a lot of sense, because are you still doing OMAD, the 1 meal a day?
Yeah, I was off it for like the last week or so, but I had been on it for like the last few months, and then I'm getting back this week back on it again. I was trying to get a little bit of weight, so I switched off of it. But yeah, for the last 7 years, I've been pretty much on it for the last 6 out of 7. So
Right. And that's something to me. It's like to have that sort of long-term focus. Was that something that you always had, or you had to develop that over time?
yeah, it's something I had to develop over time for sure. Because the long term, we want to do what's pleasurable in the short term, right? Delayed gratification is something that you have to learn. I sort of think of it this way: as I think of it as, every day I am opening a box and I'm putting in a bunch of good stuff for me, and I'm writing my name on it, and I'm addressing it to myself 5 years in the future. And
Hmm.
every day I fill a box and I ship that box off, right? And I can ship that box off with good stuff, or I can ship it off with bad stuff. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? It's like, but it's coming. Like with the choices that you make today, if you're alive 5 years in the future, most of us will be, you're going to suffer the consequences or the benefits of those things. And so that's what I'm focusing on is that idea, is that I'm paying it forward to myself, right? And so, but it took some time to get to that level of thinking, and I think one way that helped me to realize that was, and especially when I was going through hard times, is like everything that you're experiencing today is something that you set up for yourself 5 years ago, right? Like
Right.
whatever
Right.
your life is now, it's because of the choices that you made. Let's say, 5 is an arbitrary number, but about 5 years ago, right? So you're paying for those things now. And so it's like, once you start to realize that, then you're like, well, I would like my future to be better. And so let me do the work now to make that future better.
And why is it that? Because that makes, total sense. Compound interest compounds regardless, right? Like it's just going to compound. So why is it so difficult for people to, I guess, come to that realization? You're obviously a smart guy, but there have been plenty of smart people that do stupid things and lead, garbage lives. So why do you think men struggle with having that conversation with themselves?
I think part of it is because they don't have rules and a framework for
Right.
making, one thing that I try to do is not rely on my judgment. I try to pre-make decisions, right? I try
Okay.
to have rules that guide my life. I have, I'm strict with myself because I know that my judgment sucks, right? Any given moment, because
Right.
your emotional state will control your decision making process. We're emotional creatures. We cannot help from that. being the case, right? And so you have to make decisions ahead of time when you're in the best state of mind. And so it's not a matter of, it's more of a matter of, it's impossible. It's an impossible task to make right decisions every day, to use your judgment every day. You have to take that off of yourself and make it so that those decisions are pre-made for you, that you have at some point set forth the plan and the rules and laid it down, and you're living by the, Jocko Willink always says that discipline equals freedom. And it's true. That's the only way to have freedom, because if you don't have the discipline, then you'll be a slave to your own desires and your emotional state. And so that's why so many men struggle with it, is because they think that they can do it on willpower alone, or they think that they can decide to make good choices and they'll make good choices. We all will make bad choices. Our judgments are not to be relied on. We cannot trust our emotions, right? These are some of the things that Marcus Aurelius actually talked about, is not trusting yourself, not trusting your judgment. Instead, you have to put forth, you have to know that you're going to make mistakes. I always talk about this idea of trying to defeat my future self, because I know my future self is going to try and sabotage everything that I'm building now. And so how can I defeat that person? Right. But I know this opponent very, very well. I know what his tricks are. I know what he'll attempt to do. I know the mental gymnastics he'll do to justify his actions as to why he should not go to the gym today, or go for a run, or do the work today. And so I can defeat him now by setting rules, by constraints on him, by shackling him, and making it so that he doesn't have the options that will destroy things.
Right. So it sounds to me like you live a very principled life. Like you have a set of principles. You understand exactly what you're going to do. And I think that all great men, or men that have been really successful, they live. I think it was Ray Dalio wrote that book, Principles. I haven't read it, but he's a guy that's been very successful in his own realm. So the other question is then jumping onto that, is because you were training for a 100-mile ultra marathon for a while, right?
Right.
But then you decided against it, correct? Like you decided, at the end of the day, not to go through with it. What was your deciding factor after you had already made the choice and already committed to training to this thing, to say, you know what, this actually isn't the right step for me. This isn't the right move.
Yeah. So actually what happened was I failed at it. So
okay.
I trained, this was during the whole, pandemic thing. Right. And I was training like that year when this was 2020, I guess. Right. I decided I was either going to, because I'd run a bunch of marathons. So I was like, okay, I'm either going to quit running entirely, because I was getting tired of running, or I'm going to run 100 miles. Right. And I decided I was going to do the 100-mile race, because I was like, well, at what point are you actually going to do, like, if you're ever going to do this in your life, now's a good time to do it, because you've been training, right? I was in good shape. And so at the beginning of that year, I started training with that goal of running a 100-mile race. And then everything started getting canceled, right? I had a marathon. I ended up running it solo, just because I trained for the marathon and just ran it myself. And then I had a 50-mile race, and I trained for that as a stepping stone to the 100-mile race. And when it came around time, that 50-mile race got canceled. So, but I still ran it. I ran it myself. I ran it 50 miles. It took me a little over 8 hours to do that.
Wow.
And I just ran loops around the bay here in San Diego until that was done. And then, on the road to the 100-mile, I was supposed to run this 100-mile race from Flagstaff to the Grand Canyon. And I went up to Flagstaff and trained at altitude for a month, did, 30, 40-mile runs, like all the training to do it. And then that got canceled. And then, so my plan was to come back to San Diego after I'd done the training, I'm acclimated to the altitude, and then run that 100-mile race, and just solo. And I started feeling like, I don't know, there was something wrong with the training. I think maybe because I was training at the altitude, I wasn't able to train as intense, whatever. I wasn't ready, but I went out to do it, and I ended up making it like 36 miles. And then I called it, because I just was not in the conditioning that even though I was training to do it. And so I started training again, and I said, okay, I'm not giving up on this thing. I'll just restart from where I'm at and just build my base up and get back to the 100-mile. And then what happened was I got sick. I got COVID and it just wiped me out, and I couldn't train anymore. And I was, I lost all the conditioning that I had. And so at that point, I just, it was taking over so much of my life, like train for a 100-mile race. You're running 70, 80 miles a week.
Right.
And I still hadn't fully recovered. I tried to run, and it was just, I could hardly even run. So that's when I decided that, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to continue down this path right now. And maybe I'll do it again sometime in the future. Train for 100 miles. I haven't been running lately. I'm probably going to start up running again. But yeah, so I mean, technically I failed at it, right? And that's what happened. But I feel good about it in the sense that I did. And then this is the thing about life is like, it doesn't matter. Like, so many people put everything on the success, right? Of making it. And that's really not, sometimes there's a good portion of life that is luck. There's a good portion, like we were talking about before, that's outside of your control. And what's important to me is that I didn't miss the runs. I trained for the thing. I did all the training I was supposed to do. And even though I didn't make it that 100 miles, sure, I made it the 50 mile. I did what I could do. You know what I mean? And so that to me is a success, even though I didn't make the 100-mile goal that I had planned.
So that's it's pretty incredible that you being able to do that and having that sort of self-awareness to decide, what, this isn't going to work out right now for me. Jumping on that, when you're talking about like some success, I mean, success is a little bit of luck and stuff. You've made $1 million in like 5 different business ventures, right? Mm-hmm. When you're deciding like, okay, I'm going to start a business or I'm going to do this thing, do you have some sort of a number, or do you not even focus on the end number, and you just like, look, I'm just going to go each and every day and focus on the task at hand, and then if it happens, it happens?
Yeah, I don't focus on the end number. I think that the thing is, like, I always try to think in terms of, people set goals, right? They set goals that I don't consider to be goals, right? Ridiculous things that they can't achieve. So if I set a goal of making $1 million, that's not a goal, because I don't have control over that. You should never have a goal of something you don't have control over. That I call an aspiration. I could aspire to make $1 million. That's fine. All right. But from that aspiration, like, a true goal is something that you have direct control over, right? So let's say you had an aspiration to make $1 million. Well, let's say selling a book. Okay. You're going to write a book. You're going to try and make $1 million and selling that book. So now you have to break that down to a goal. Like, what can you do as a goal that's going to make it 99% chance that you're going to achieve that aspiration? Well, I mean, in that case, let's say selling a book, I don't know. It's pretty hard to make $1 million from a book. I suppose what you'd have to do is go out there and, every day you're going to go and go market that book. Like, you'd have to figure out a system, a plan for it. In fact, probably an easier one to imagine, because I think that's a really difficult one, right? And then this is also the part of it, right? Is you see how much struggle that I even have of like, how would you make $1 million from a book?
Right. And you've done it, right?
I would never even set that aspiration, because I don't like, if you don't believe it, you can't achieve it. It's
right.
Very, very true, right? You've probably heard that before. So let's talk about something that would be an easier one, right? Or one that I could see the path to. Let's say you want to get 100,000 YouTube subscribers, right? Because I went down this road before. That might be my aspiration. Again, I don't have control over that directly, so it can't be a goal. So instead, when I was at that point, I made a goal I said, all right, well, in order to have 100,000 YouTube subscribers, at this time, my channel had, I think, like 2,000. I said, I don't know anyone who has 2,000 videos on YouTube who doesn't have 100,000 YouTube subscribers. Right. So I made my goal to make 2,000 videos, right? I had 500 at the time. So I need 1,500 more videos. So I said, okay, well, I want to achieve this in 2 years. And so the math worked out that I needed to do 2 videos a day and 3 on Sunday. So that's what I did. So that was my goal. And that I could achieve. And then, of course, I hit the aspiration in doing that, right? So that's kind of how I look at these things. Is I never would set the goal of making $1 million, right? I might have some aspiration of making so much per month, or having some level of success with the thing, but then it's always going to break down to some kind of goal that I have control over, right? So when I was writing my books, for example, which again, I didn't have a goal of making, $1 million from those books, even though I've made over $1 million from selling books. my goal was simply, when I was writing the book, on one of the books, was to write one chapter every single day, because I could control that. That I could do, right?
Right.
For one of my other books, my goal was to do 2 Pomodoro every day, and basically write for an hour, the first hour of every single day. And I did that for 6 months, and I got that book done, right? So those are things that I have direct control over, that I can grind it out, that I can make happen. And that's how I look at all the things, right? With Bulldog Mindset, I've got a bunch of them, right? I make 3 videos a week. I do 1 video on the membership, right? I have different things at different times where it's like, okay, I just consistently do this thing. I come up with the system, and then the results are not in my control, right? Those things take care of themselves. It's, again, going back to the Stoic example of the archer, right? The Stoic have an example of this archer. He draws back the bow, right? He practices, like he aims as carefully as he can at the target, but once he releases the arrow from the bow, it's out of his control. He doesn't worry about it. He doesn't need to know where the arrow goes. He can't control it anymore. He's done his job. He's done his part, right? The wind could take the arrow, whatever can happen, but he has to focus on what he can control, which is aiming, which is practicing. But once that arrow is released, the results are outside of his control. And that's how I look at things. It's like, I just want to aim as carefully as I can. I want to set myself up as carefully as I can, but I'm not going to hinge my personal success, just like we talked about with the 100 mile, on what actually happens. Instead, it is, did I do everything that I could do in order to achieve that result? The result, it comes or it doesn't come.
Then how do you account for, and this might just be my artist brain sort of, I have a thing when it comes to, I guess, like beauty in language or story or whatever. How do you account for the actual sculpting of the thing that you're doing? Does that make sense?
I think so. Like the art part of it.
Yeah.
That's, I think that's something where there's always this conflict between the entrepreneur and the artist, right? The entrepreneur wants to be efficient, wants to make money, wants to be logical, and the artist wants to be creative and express yourself, and they're in conflict. The artist doesn't care about money. The entrepreneur tries. So you have to sort of have this balance between the things, right? If you're just pure artist, you can be, but you're not going to be successful. You're not going to make money. You're not going to, actually be able to produce something from your work, right? It's not going to be effective, right? Because even the most successful artists, they have to have some marketing. They have to have something that is getting the word out, that is an aspect of it, right? If you're just pure entrepreneur, you'll lose the passion and the love for what you're doing, right? It'll feel too much like a grind and feel like it's pointless, and you'll be a hack, right? You'll be inauthentic. As Stephen Pressfield says, you'll be a hack, right? And so you have to have this balance between the two. You have to really do the art for the art's sake, but within the framework that the entrepreneur, it's sort of like you create these constraints for yourself, right? It's, imagine if I gave you a task, right? If you're working your job and I said, all right, this is what needs to be done, but you have free reign in how you decide to do it, and the creativity that you bring to that task. That is how you have to look at things. It's never going to be, the artist can never just live out as the artist, and the entrepreneur, if you live that way, you'll be miserable. So you have to find that balance. You have to take everything you're doing and you have to apply the art to it. Like, I think the real magic and secret to life, there's actually a really good documentary called Jiro Dreams of Sushi, right? And it's about the sushi chef in Japan, I think he's been doing it for 40 years or something, some ridiculous amount of time. And every day he does pretty much the same thing, but he makes an art out of everything, these mundane things that he does, on how he produces the rice and steams the rice every morning. It's like, it's to a meticulous detail. And he takes so much pride in every single aspect of it, and how he folds the sushi and all these things. So he's taken something that is not artistic, right? And he's made it artistic. And that's what we have to do to all of our life, right? Everything from how we clean the kitchen to how we create YouTube videos, or all of those things, everything we can express as an expression of our art, right? We have to take that to it. It's bringing that passion to it and that fire to everything that we do, whether we like it or not.
Right.
I think sometimes we just want to do the creative thing and the fun thing, and we don't realize that like we can make everything fun, right? I just got did yoga, and I got this card that they were giving out yoga, and it said, and I put it as my wallpaper. It says, when I make joy a priority, brilliant ideas will come naturally. And yeah, so, and I'm meditating on that recently.
Nice. I think that's why I was drawn to your to the Bulldog Mindset membership so much, is because I come from the artistic world and I made a lot of art and it was great, but I made no money.
Right.
So like I was like, this something's wrong here, man.
Yeah.
And you were very much like, you're like, look, I do my Pomodoros, I do the thing, you don't like, that's what's so good about it. It's like, I just get it done. I don't worry about it. I just do it. And like learning that has taught me how to be a better artist, as a matter of fact, because I'm far more organized, and I can get a lot more stuff done.
Good.
What does manhood mean to you?
Manhood really, being a man is about taking responsibility. It's about relying on your own judgment, right? Maybe taking the counsel from others, but ultimately relying on your own judgment and seeing yourself as the central source of what is right and what is wrong, like making the buck stop at you and taking full responsibility for your life. That's what it is, and the consequences of your actions, like being willing to do whatever that it is that you want, like exercising your will, but accepting fully the consequences for those actions, good or bad. That is truly what it means to be a man, or manhood to me.
Right. What was the relationship like with your father, if you don't mind?
Yeah. So it's interesting growing up, it wasn't bad, but it wasn't great either. Right. I spent some time with my father fishing, playing baseball, things like that. But I didn't see him like all the time. And then, as I grew up and became an adult, it was pretty rocky, right? I remember when I bought my first rental property, my father, he didn't understand, and he cursed me out on the phone and told me what an idiot I was and how I was ruining my life, and and how dumb and he basically hung up on me. And and then throughout my life, I always felt like this, he used a lot of guilt tactics, and I didn't have really strong boundaries. And it was always about I was very, conditioned, as most boys are, to seek out his approval, right? The approval of the father figure. And it wasn't until, I'd say probably close to my 30s that I took a stand and said, you know what, I'm going to have boundaries. I'm not going to allow this. I had a conversation with him on the phone because he was trying to guilt me about something and make me feel bad about not caring about the family and all these things. And I said, you know what, that's it. I'm not going to allow people to talk to me like that in my life. It doesn't matter who it is. And because I had this revelation about that, I was not going to put expectations on people, and I was not going to allow them to put expectations on me. And when I did that, he did not react very positively at all, right? He was very upset about that. And I said, I love you, Dad, but I'm not going to have you talk to me like this, and I'm not going to allow people to guilt me or who are negative to me in my life, right? And so regardless of who they are, this is my standard. And I held to that, and we probably didn't talk for about a year or so. And then, he came around, and, and now we're the best of friends, right? We're actually great friends now, right? We go and play poker, and never have any kind of conflict. We're good buddies. Because it's man to man now relationship. You know what I mean? That's how it has to be, because I am the king of my domain. Right? I have my tribe, and I am the king. We're two kings meeting together, right? As before, I was under his authority, under his domain. It was his kingdom, and he tried to keep me in line with that, as any good father should do. But in order to break away and become a man, you have to cast off that. You have to cast off that judgment of your father, and you have to take up your own scepter and become your own king and say that my judgment, I am in charge now. I am the ruler. My judgment is what matters. And that is the only way to have a true good relationship with your father.
Yeah, the notion of killing your father, like metaphorically killing your father. Carl Jung talks about that stuff, and so I think that I think it was it Freud that said a man can't be a man until he kills his father.
Yeah, yeah.
And I 100%, man. The whole thing about king energy. What was that? There was a book, Warrior, Lover, King,
Magician. Yeah.
Magician. Yeah, and assuming that king energy. So, with respect to historical figures and archetypes of manhood, did you have people that you looked to and you were like, oh, I want to be like that guy, or that's somebody that I want to emulate? Historical figures.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, they're more mythological figures for me, right? So I was always drawn to Superman as an archetype, right? The interesting thing, Superman's kind of become perverted in the last maybe 10 years or so with the movies and stuff, but the old Superman, what's that?
In what way specifically?
The old Superman would never kill anyone, ever, under any circumstance, right? He would never take a life. The old Superman was a reluctant hero, right? He was not a prideful hero. He was completely humble. He only did what he had to do. He made those tough choices that were impossible choices, but he represented that there's always a way to make a right choice, no matter how hard the circumstance is, right? That noble character. Another one that I looked up to was Hercules, right? The mythological Hercules, someone who had gone through, had made some mistakes, some of them not even his own fault. Fate had, twisted him in a direction, but he did what needed to be done, regardless of whether it was his fault. He took responsibility and he did the hard things. And, he represented this strength, right? That's, in fact, the reason why I wear, it's kind of like as a kid, I always wanted to have bracers,
Is that why you interviewed Kevin Sorbo?
What's that? Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So yeah, those things kind of influence or shape my life. I think the good archetypes, again, Superman, Hercules, to some degree, they present an ideal, a perfect ideal.
Right.
Obviously, no one is going to be that. Obviously, it's impossible for a Superman to really exist in the world, in the sense that there are choices that you have to make where both of them are wrong, where there's tough. You cannot always make the choice that everyone wins and benefits, but somehow Superman did that, right? But the reason why that exists is such a powerful concept, and why I'm so sad that that's been lost in the Superman of recent, is because that's something that we should all strive for. It is a principle, right? Sometimes the thing about having principles is that principles are not absolute, in the sense that different principles supersede other principles. And there's a hierarchy of principles, and some principles are in conflict with each other, even though you hold both of these principles, but you have to have the prioritization of which principles in that hierarchy come first. But Superman, Hercules, to some degree, represents a pure principle. And those remind us of the truth of those things. And so I've always looked up to those type of things where you have a very pure, unadulterated principle, even though the real world is a lot more messy than that.
Right. And how do you determine the hierarchy, where they rank?
A lot of it is, some of it is a thought experiment. Some of it is just life experience, as you start to realize you hold a principle, and then you realize a point where you kind of have to look at it and say, okay, I need to take an action that is in contradiction to this principle. And then at that point you realize, well, there's two possible choices. You're weak, you're failing,
right?
It's a lack of discipline or character, or there's some superseding principle. And that's when you discover a deeper truth about life, right? Why is it in this case okay to do this thing, right? Take a principle as just a Superman one. I never take a life. You could hold that principle, but there are many circumstances in life. Well, there could be circumstances in life where you would have to abandon that principle for a higher level principle, right? Of saving lives. Maybe that's a more important one. Again, that's the kind of juxtaposition that the newest Superman in the movies has had to make, right? But again, the reason why I don't like that is because that takes Superman out of the realm of the mythological and puts him into the real world. He's not a real world person. He represents the true principle, the purest form of the principle of never take a life. Right. In the real world, we have principles that actually conflict, right? Sometimes in order to save lives, you must take lives. That doesn't, most of us don't have to deal with that particular one. That's just an example of one that's an easy one for, I think, people to digest and understand, that there would be circumstances in which killing someone would be the right thing to do because of a higher principle, right? But there that exists at every level in our lives, right? You might have a principle of being honest all the time, but is there a time where there's a superseding principle where being dishonest would be the thing that serves a higher level principle of someone's welfare or good, right? Because, here's a good one, right? It's like some people hold this principle. They're like, no, I tell the truth all the time. I'm honest all the time. Well, sometimes, giving someone the truth all the time is not the right thing to do. Sometimes that does not help them in their spiritual progression, their development as a human being, or edifying them and helping them in life. Sometimes a little bit of a deception of not being blunt about the truth is a beneficial thing. That's a higher level principle of doing what is good and right for a person to help them in life, right? Even historical figures like Jesus did not tell the truth all the time. It's interesting because he spoke in parables, right? And those parables were not exactly the truth. Some of the things that he said, he had a higher level principle of giving the concept that was so important for someone's spiritual growth and understanding, rather than just giving them the absolute truth, because that would not be beneficial to them. So again, don't have to subscribe to my principles, right? But we have to have our own principles and have our own hierarchy of principles that we figure out. And that's what makes us different and unique. And, and really, like, you can respect a person. In fact, I forget the quote. I think it might've been Abraham Lincoln. There's this quote where he says that, I don't judge a man by my principles, but by his own. Right. And that's the key to it, is like being a man of principles. We might have conflicting principles, but that's fine. But I'm going to judge you by how well you stick to your principles, not by my own principles.
Yeah, Abraham Lincoln was a singular individual. I mean, there's a book called Team of Rivals that goes into basically how he selected his cabinet, and it was just like a bunch of his enemies. It's crazy, but he's like, I don't give a shit. Like, I got to run the country, so I'm going to pick the best people for the job. And I think that that's something that, unfortunately, is missing from what I see in our society and stuff. But you mentioned something when you're talking about Superman about nobility, and nobility, I think, is actually one of a man's greatest virtues, his ability to be noble. You know what I mean? And it's missing so much from where we are now. And do you agree with that? And if you do, why do you think that? Why is nobility something that doesn't seem to be striven is not the right word, but like, we don't seem to strive for nobility?
Yeah. Well, before I can answer that, give me kind of what your definition of nobility is.
Benevolence, the ability to have, somebody who is powerful, who has the ability to create, to somebody of great power that has the ability to do great harm, but instead chooses to do good. Yeah, that is somebody that's noble. Marcus Aurelius, I think, was noble because he was running the he was running the Roman Empire, but chose to turn it around into something really positive.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. Like, why don't we aspire to that? I think because men are confused about weakness and strength, right? A lot of times, again, with masculinity, men think that aggression and control is masculine, and that's the opposite, right? It's like you said, it's the ability to restrain yourself. It's the ability to have, it's having the power. Like, true power is having the ability to destroy, but instead choosing to create. It's
Right.
not being trapped in a situation, right? It's not forcing a situation, right? It's being able to constrain yourself. And I think that the part of that is difficult about the nobility is that it is a virtue that very few people will recognize when they see it. And so people will think you weak when you're noble, but you
Right.
know, right? Like, and again, I think part of the reason for this is because we look so much to the external for outside validation and approval. And that is what our society is today, with Facebook posts and Instagram likes and all of these things and influencers. And so we don't look at our own internal judgment and assessment of ourselves as important. We look at other people's. And when you're noble, if you strive for nobility, other people will see you as weak. They will judge you harshly, and they might call you a simp or a beta in today's terminology, right?
Yeah.
But you know that you really have that strength, and that's where you're coming
Right.
from. And some people will recognize that, like
Right.
you know, and so I think that's where it comes from, is that when you place your sense of worth and value on the judgment and valuation of others, the external, then nobility seems like a stupid thing. It's pointless. It doesn't make any sense. Why would you do
Right.
that, right? But when your internal judgment and your internal view of yourself, which we could call your character, when that is the most important thing, then nobility is a very high virtue to strive for.
I had a martial arts instructor. I used to train in Muay Thai and MMA and stuff. A martial arts instructor. And it was like day one. I was there, and he goes, "You guys want to know the best defense when you're fighting?" And we go, well, what? And he turned around and ran in the other direction.
Yeah.
But this is a guy that could do considerable amounts of damage. And I
Right.
didn't understand it at 20. I was like, what are you talking? I'm here to kick somebody's ass. Like, what are you talking
Yeah.
about? But he was like, look, man, if you can avoid the fight, avoid it. There's no reason to be out in the street fighting. Like,
Right.
what's the matter with you? And so I've heard several fighters say, I do everything I can to avoid it and just walk away. And people that don't know anything or are not in touch with violence because they, oh, you're weak, you're a pussy, you're X, Y, and Z. But the guy understands the consequences. So
Yeah.
that's definitely what I got from there. The confusion of men. I'm going to put my tinfoil hat on right now.
Okay.
Is that something that obfuscation? Is that deliberate, or is that a function of our wealth and the sacrifices our forefathers, cultural forefathers made? Like, why are men so confused? What do you think it is?
Yeah. I don't ascribe anything to malice, right? I mean, there's people that are creating this kind of society and culture and engineering it on purpose. I do believe that, but not for the purpose that we think, right? Because they believe they're doing the right thing, just like everybody believes they're doing the right thing, right?
Right.
Just like Hitler believed he was doing the right thing, just like everybody. If you read How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, the very first chapter of the book, he talks about, about how even the most hardened criminal believes that they're doing just what they had to do.
Yeah.
That everyone thinks that they're right, that they're doing the right thing. So again, I do think that there are forces that are engineering this kind of weakness of men, but they're doing it because they think it's the right thing. They truly believe these things, right? So don't hate them, right? The greatest gift that a man can give is love to the world. That's the greatest thing. But so what's happening here? What's happening? What's happening is a lot of different things that are kind of culminating, and it's really no different than it's ever really been in society. Because if you think about it, being a man of character, being a man of virtue and principles has always been a rarity. Has always been, right? I mean, there's been tougher times in life where men had to be strong or they die, but there's always weak men. And there's a cycle, right? There's a cycle of strong men create good times create weak men create hard times, right? That cycle. Aaron what's his name? Stefan. I just lost his name again, but
Yeah.
but he passed. But he wrote a book on that subject. And it's just a cycle that we go through, is because we forget, right? We forget what it's like. And again, like I said, I don't think it's a malice type of thing. It's just that when you have good times and things are easy, you can get away with having a society full of weak men. And men will become weak. They'll become soft. The things that make you strong are the hardships of life and having to survive those things. And that is why it's so critical as a man to do hard things yourself, to bring pain upon yourself, because we live in the easiest time that it's ever existed in history. We can go to the grocery store and get food. We can get
It's crazy.
we want. We live like kings did 100 years ago, right? Better than they did. So we have to bring the pain upon ourselves and the hard times upon ourselves willingly to make ourselves stronger. Otherwise, we will become weak.
So then when you're coaching guys, because that's what you do, you coach men through your organization, is like, how do you get them past that mental hurdle to get to really to be like, look, man, you really got to do the hard stuff in order to develop yourself? Because it's one thing to watch your videos and hear you say it, but it's another thing to do it and to really internalize it.
I think the realization that I try to get men to realize is that pain is coming for you one way or another, right? You can hide under your bed and it can drag you out by your feet, kicking and screaming, or you can go out of your house and face it. And so life is pain. Life will be full of pain and hardship. And if it is thrust upon you, it will cause suffering. If you willingly embrace it and bring it upon yourself, it will produce strength and growth and pride and fulfillment in life. And so you can't avoid pain, but you can choose to not suffer. And if you let it come to you, if you make it come and drag you out of your bed, you will suffer. And so it's not a question of whether or not, it's like you've seen probably that meme or that image of the guy, the fat guy, and like there's like a skinny guy inside maybe, and it's like, suffer the pain of discipline or the pain of not discipline, essentially. I can't remember exactly what it says, but this is the truth. Like either way, it's going to be pain, right? So you might as well take it like a man. You might as well get some benefit from it, because if you don't become hard, if you don't become strong, you're going to get hurt a lot more in life. Right? So better to bring the pain upon yourself and become stronger and benefit from it than to have it just harm you and the people you love around you.
Right. Jordan Peterson talks about that. He goes like, often the people that get destroyed are the people that wait for the pain to come to them. And sometimes that you can't even recover from that because you're so not prepared for it. I know you got to go here real quick. So I just wanted to say, I wanted to ask you one last question is, what do you want your legacy to be? Like, what do you want it to say on your tombstone when you're gone? Like, what do you want to leave behind?
Yeah. So that's an interesting question. I don't care. I don't care about a legacy at all. I don't care what happens after I'm dead. Maybe there's more, maybe there's not. Either way, it doesn't matter. I think it's a silly thing it's a prideful thing to care about a legacy. I know a lot of people disagree with me on this, but it's a waste of effort and energy and that you could be putting towards creating a good life in the future now and improving people's lives now. Right. So I don't care.
Right. So then what do you hope to accomplish with the men that you're trying to help then?
Really to get them out of the victim mindset, to get them to take full responsibility and ownership of their lives and to see the only way, right? The stoic way, the only truth of life, which is that you can't control the external. You have to work on the internal. You have to be in control of the internal. That's the key. And that's the key to any kind of success that you want in life. And the external success, it doesn't matter. What ultimately matters is the internal success. Like we talked about with the race, with life, with goals that you set, it only matters what your view of yourself is and how well that you've lived up to that. That is the only thing that matters at the end of the day.
The kingdom within, right? Yeah. All right. Well, John, let these people know where they can find you. And thanks for your time. I know you got to run. And just let them know.
Just go to bulldogmindset.com. There'll be a pop-up to take a Bulldog quiz. Go ahead and take that quiz. It's just a 10-question quiz. It'll tell you what your Bulldog score is from 0 to 100. And then you'll be in touch with me. I'll send you some emails and some videos on how to improve your score. Bulldogmindset.com.
All right. Thanks, John.
Yeah.
Peace, guys. Later.
All right.
Thanks a lot, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
I'll put it together, edit it, and then I'll send it your way. And I appreciate that. And I'll sign up for the Discord and stuff because I didn't even realize that was stuff. You got so much stuff in there, so
yeah.
But it's good. It's all good. All right. Well, we'll talk soon, man. Thanks a lot.
Awesome.
Man. You have a great day.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. All right. Take care.